Got it. Hi, everybody. There are 9 of us. There are 9 of us on board. Ginat, wonderful to see you. Maria's coming shortly. You look wonderful. You've been at the beach.
That's not all.
Yeah.
A little makeup.
Women's secrets, you won't know.
Nice to have you, Mike.
Okay. Well, I'm very, very glad to be here as always. And let me see who we've got. Who we've got here. Yeah, Clara, Arlene, Brian, Eduardo, Flavi, Grace, and Ionia. All right. Well, I'm Mike Chen. I'm speaking to you from Central Hungary. And today's presentation is what we can do. Traditional responses to world upheaval.
Upheaval.
Yeah. And this is a very big subject. Whoop, lost the picture. You still have me there?
I still have you.
Okay. There you go. And very big subject. We put this together. We put this project together over the summer. And I should have something to share with you. Yeah, here it is. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, this is the introduction is today's conference theme, what we can do, traditional responses to world upheaval, grew out of a short conversational thread with members of GOMF in June of this year. A letter to the editor from Professor Lewis Brennan of Trinity College, Dublin, and published in the Financial Times, had commented on a note by Harlan Ullman, a well-known spokesman for the Atlantic Council, that had also been published in the newspaper. Professor Brennan pointed out the possibility that the world was at the very beginning of severe civilizational upheavals and recommended a renewed sense of human solidarity in the face of these challenges. That expression, human solidarity, not very widely heard in the public discourse these days. And it was really remarkable. The macrobiotic movement has been an active participant in support of human health and well-being, especially in response to these transformational developments since the Second World War, both in the West as well as in the East. So this is an opportune moment to remind ourselves of this historical reality. I give you the links here, Ullman's letter, Brennan's response, The Problem of Peace, Albert Schweitzer's 1952 Nobel acceptance speech, A Strategy of Peace. This is Kennedy's, JF Kennedy's American University commencement speech. These all form part of today's presentation. And as I say, it's a very, very rare occurrence in modern literature to have a reference to such topics as human solidarity. But that's exactly what we're dealing with.
Mike, can you copy and paste those links into the chat?
Possibly. I thought I thought it would be just easier if I put them up on the screen there.
I'll tell you, they are like a picture and they're not clickable.
They're not clickable. All right, so let me see if I can.
It'll be in the recording.
Yeah, they'll be in the recording. Let's see here.
Still not clickable.
No, I can't access them from the screen. So they'll just have to be, from the recording. Okay. All right, so today I'm going to tell you 3 stories of recovery, all of them macro stories, all of them in the literature, some of them, with scanty details. I filled them in as best as I can. This is not authoritative, but it should be, very, very helpful to us to consider. So 2 of them are personal stories, personal recovery stories. One of them is actually a social recovery story. The terms personal and social form a yin-yang pair, of course. And every personal recovery is, in some sense, a social recovery, just as social recoveries, too, are, in a sense, personal recoveries. And this is what makes yin and yang oneness, right? Oneness being the 7th law of Ohsawa's order of the universe. Usually in macro, we deal with personal recoveries. I have a headache. I don't feel well. I adjust my diet. I chew a little better. I get some extra sleep. In no time, I'm back in form. Sometimes the adjustments are a little more involved, take a little longer. They may involve compresses, exercise, salt baths, stretching, breathing. But these 3 examples that I'm going to relate here have none of those items. They're simply a matter of spontaneous healing. Let's call them that, shall we? Just straight out of the clear blue sky. The first involves Ohsawa as a teenager. You may have heard this story, suffering from tuberculosis in the first years of the 20th century, and attended to and diagnosed by the nascent Japanese Western-style medical system. He was summarily sent home as incurable. Does he have any idea how critical his situation is? I'm thinking pretty much no. The next thing you hear is that he's wandering around on the streets, taking in the sights, poking in the shops, and he finds himself at a used bookseller's, and there spots a box of remaindered books. Those that had already been picked over, looked at, tossed aside, and discarded. Very much like the young man himself, yes? Poked, picked over, tossed aside, and rejected. For some reason, his curiosity is aroused by this box of rejects, and he wants to look at the pile. He starts shoveling the titles around, and is he looking for something? Probably not. He's just passing the time, all the time in the world. Only in the very back of his mind, he may be thinking that the army doctors have penciled a word incurable in his medical file. Suddenly then, he chances on a pamphlet, maybe 20 years old. I'm thinking dusty cover, torn pages. Ohsawa picks it up. The author is Dr. Sagan Ishizuka, a medical doctor from the military in the previous century. The pamphlet describes frustration at his inability to help his patients. The emperor's edict that disallows the use of traditional Japanese medicine by the medical corps has hamstrung the author. The professional efforts that he's trying to use for his patients. The Ishizuka lineage, his family lineage, is actually traditional Japanese medical doctors. He himself is trained as a pharmacy tech at the time. He'll later be a fully qualified pharmacy doctor. The response from Ohsawa is that most probably he cannot fail to recognize that his personal situation in the 20th century is not so different from the situation that Ishizuka outlines the generation before. Dr. Ishizuka relates that he realizes that he's completely ignorant as to what to do. Unwittingly, this is the key to his subsequent understanding. He comes to the realization that the first line of defense in the old days, before the arrival of Western-style medicine, is in the diet. A little miso soup, a little brown rice, a small cup of tea, a return to a simple, structured life. Ishizuka further recognizes that the emperor's edict does not disallow the use of traditional Japanese food. So this is another key insight that's going to be especially important for the development of 20th century macro. Eating for health maintenance, recovery. With that, Dr. Ishizuka can start to chart his course. So his patients receive the same basic analysis and prescription. He doesn't know, he assures them, but maybe if they give up their modern style meals and instead revert to their traditional foods, they can regain their strength, their health. And Ohsawa discovers in reading, many of them do just that. So Ohsawa, nothing better to do, starts with Ishizuka's recommendation. And in no time, he is indeed free of his tuberculosis. Though just 19, in giving thanks to an infinity that points the way to his healing, he vows to save 3 million existences. And this marks the beginning of Ohsawa's adult life. This plays a very big part in how we come to be here together today. So here's now the second story. It has to do with one of Ohsawa's best students, perhaps even the best. Herman Ihara meets Ohsawa just at the beginning of the Second War. Herman is a metallurgy student in Tokyo and has a fascination about eating wild grasses, raw. Attends several of Ohsawa's lectures, and so also develops an interest in yin-yang dialectics, the foundation of the primitive Asian philosophy that Ohsawa teaches. But Ihara is a relatively carefree student, whimsical. He comes and goes, very modern in that regard, yes? At war's end, Herman is chasing girls in the dance halls during the Allied occupation. His family naturally fears for his future and decides to arrange a marriage before the young man gets himself into more trouble. Herman, without much consideration, agrees. The marriage sours in no time, ends abruptly, bitterly and tragically in the winter. Herman loses his mind. What else is he to do? I mean this quite literally. Until this point in his life, Herman's attitude has been modestly careless, but still rather functional. Call it half-minded. Now, all of a sudden, he has lost his functionality entirely. In his dazed state, he realizes that he must do something. But what? The enlightenment flashes. He needs to see Ohsawa. Ohsawa's school is called the Maison Ignoramus, the House of Ignorance. The title refers to the first principle of the Buddhist organization of being. The human is said to start from a point of ignorance. Ohsawa underlines this by using the word as the name of the school. These students also learn that all they possess is the present. The past is not retrievable, the future entirely unknown, so why worry? Ohsawa students have a real curriculum. They learn actual life skills, how to think, how to speak, for example. These too are Buddhist principles: right thought, right speech, right action. All of these are part of the Buddhist doctrine, the Dharma. But there are no graduation requirements. The student is free to graduate when they feel ready to embark on life journey. Sometimes their departure is premature, then they're free to return. At a later point in time, Ohsawa will indeed codify a graduation requirement. He'll write, a student is ready to leave when they realize just how ignorant they are. Herman, with no functional mind you, approaches Ohsawa and asks for shelter. This too is Buddhist, a request for shelter. Ohsawa grants the young man's request, but does not assign him any duties. He is probably thinking that time pressures would interfere with the young man's recovery. Herman is free to do or not do as he may wish. Other youngsters have their routine: the cooking, the cleaning, selling the newspapers that the school publishes. And every day, the school congregates as a group for a lecture by Ohsawa. World events, history, science, all with an insight gained from yin-yang analysis, what Ohsawa calls primitive Far East philosophy. And it is in these lectures that Ohsawa introduces Buddhist metaphysics. And what's the big deal about Buddhist metaphysics? Well, that the self sitting in the lecture area is not the real self. The real self is something else, somewhere else, entirely impassive and unimpressed with the comings and goings and local conditions of the here and now. The other self is the actual self, actual and imperishable, and much bigger than the small self that's seated listening to Ohsawa. It is, in a word, a macro self. How else can someone describe these lectures except as a heaven sent for the young Ihara? The fellow who had already lost half his mind, the so-called functional half, can now go ahead and lose the other non-functional half too. He becomes, for all intents and purposes, a Zen practitioner. Inside of a month, he can thank Ohsawa and depart. He begins his new life as a macrobiotic instructor. Ohsawa now returns for us as the protagonist of the third story. This is the social healing story. The first two, personal healing stories. But now it's 1945. It's after the close of the Second War, and Ohsawa himself is under arrest, in detention, in an army prison, for interfering in the war effort by trying repeatedly to cross the Manchurian border into the Soviet Union, to make his way to Moscow to ask the government there to put an end to the war. For this, he's placed in a dungeon. The interior design is a pounded earth floor and rats His meals consist of uncooked potatoes. How do you yangize them? Easy, he discovers. Just scratch a hole in the center of the floor, place the potato there. That's as much yangizing as you could get. Did I mention that Ohsawa's hair fell out? But he's in luck. The end of the war means that his guards have changed. Instead of the Japanese Imperial Army, his new guards are American. The food improves. While awaiting his release, he asks for pen and paper and quickly writes a memorandum to General MacArthur, the supreme commander of the occupying force, regarding the post-war status of the emperor. Yes, you heard me right. He writes a memo to MacArthur, the supreme commander, concerning the post-war status of the emperor. Ohsawa recommends that the general retain the emperor in his position, but in a diminished status. He should no longer be considered as a member of the divinity. You will not be at all surprised to learn that this is exactly what MacArthur does. Ohsawa is released, and his hair eventually grows back. But no mistake, the Japanese defeat, meanwhile, is utter, complete, and devastating. We have all heard how some soldiers refused to surrender, instead living out their lives hiding in the jungles, in the islands of Southeast Asia. How will the civilian population recover from the trauma? The emperor himself will form the opinion that recovery will take a century. But the outline of the steps to social recovery is murky. While Ohsawa is teaching at the ignoramus, he's considering. His describing of yin and yang has improved markedly over the years. Now he's over 50, and in the early 1950s, he's also teaching European students in Japan in French. They, from their side, are mesmerized, astonished by his description of the versatility of yin and yang philosophy. This is wonderful, they exclaim. The whole world should know this. But then they also critique. You are just like the Europeans, they accuse Ohsawa about the Japanese. You hold on to the best things for yourselves. Ohsawa will write about this moment in utmost candor. He will use a word you encounter very infrequently in his writings, saying, I was shocked, but the more that I thought about it, the more I thought that they were correct. His students, that is. So once decided, he takes action. He writes 100 individual letters to world leaders, announcing his willingness to travel to their capitals to instruct them personally in the 5,000-year-old yin-yang Far Eastern philosophy and its application to the modern nutrition and dietetics of their populations. he awaits their responses. He receives one. 1 out of the 100 returns a note, postmarked from deepest Central Africa, signed by Dr. Albert Schweitzer, MD, PhD, a one-time concert organist and pastor who has cross-trained to become a medical doctor so as to undertake a spiritual medical assignment to personally attend to the rehabilitation of Western civilization. He does this openly, not shy about any of it. The 20th century is very clear in the outline of the crumbling of Western civilization. He is doing what he can to forestall and reverse it. Schweitzer writes to Ohsawa, if you're ever in the neighborhood, please stop in. Schweitzer is the recipient of the 1952 Nobel Peace Prize. He is an intimate friend of Rudolf Steiner, introduced by the Theosophists. Indeed, Schweitzer and Steiner share the same spiritual mission, the reconstruction of the spiritual life of the West, though the two use entirely different methodologies. Ohsawa will accept Schweitzer's invitation. He and Lima will leave Japan forever, which is the term that Ohsawa uses in saying goodbye. Transit to India, spend nearly 2 years there, and then to Africa and overland to meet Schweitzer. Schweitzer, Steiner, and Ohsawa will thus embark in their different ways on a worldwide mission now to include all of humanity. These stories give you a great model on how to use the encounters that you have with the shock and the falling away of the modern time for best practice. Let's hear questions.
The question that comes to my mind is, who was Ohsawa to write letters to the emperor and to Schweitzer and whoever? He had a school, right? Was he a known person?
And let me answer by this way. A man who is able to enunciate the Dharma to a room of youngsters, teenagers like Ihara, and all of a sudden have one who is suffering, Herman, spontaneously cure himself, has got to be considered remarkable. So he had a certain reputation. Ohsawa had a certain reputation, not only in the working classes and the intellectual classes and the student classes of Japan, but in the upper reaches as well. How do you prove this? Very simple. When he went to India he stayed at the Indian embassy. That was his residence. He was conducting consultations there. So he was very well known for doing what it is that he was doing, and somehow acted. Was it impromptu? Was it directed? The literature is not clear. The English language and the French language literature, not clear at all as to how it was that he ended up undertaking a mission to end the war by breaching the Manchurian border on horseback. You see, how did he end up doing that? You have to really think about it. But the literature doesn't get into the details. That will have to await a very serious study of the archive in Japan, the Ohsawa Library. Does that answer your question at all?
It begins.
That's very good. That's exactly what we want. Okay, other questions now.
Well,
Eduardo,
Go ahead,
did you want to ask?
Eduardo.
well, first thing, very, very nice to meet you. You have all my respect. I'm looking for answers for many, many, many years, and you looks like the source of the information that I need to satisfy my inner curiosity and understand even part of my mission in this life. So I met Tomio Kikuchi. I have many questions for you, but because I heard the same story you're telling from a different perspective, and the movement that Kikuchi created in Brazil is really big. He published, I think, 18 books, and it's still there. They have online meetings like this, but is on the records any reference how do you know? If you don't know, it's okay. How he tells about Tomio Kikuchi, because the Kikuchi also went to the school that Bernadette Kikuchi was selling the story. They're part of this, and it looks like that Ohsawa and his vision saw South America as part of the planet, a big part of the planet, and say, you know what? Go there. And Kikuchi have a difficult personality. Kikuchi was a fighter. But he went there and he have deep respect for Ohsawa. Do you know anything about Kikuchi?
And the literature in both English and in French, very, very, very little published about South America. Very, very, very little. So that has to be done there. You have to do all of that there, and then, as I say, you have to go to the archive in Japan, because that's where the research material is.
Okay, then later you can send me a reference to. I don't know how to go to the archive to do something. This is the first time I'm hearing there's an archive in Japan about about George Ohsawa.
Right.
You talk about the doctor that was cured Ohsawa. Kikuchi mentioned this doctor. What's his name? The doctor
Sagen Ishizuka.
Dr. Ishizuka was mentioned in the lectures. I remember Kikuchi mentioned the respect.
Very important.
Very important. Yes, the base. He was the first.
Yeah, correct.
And now, as you said, this thing became, slowly but steady became a global thing. It's a global. We are the old folks, but I'm seeing, at least in Brazil, because I was part of the school, you know, this concept of shelter that you just said, that because it's all based on Buddhism also, it's beautiful. Even if Kikuchi criticized the Buddhists, because Kikuchi said, you know what, this idea of half man, half gods, I don't believe. This idea that Buddha was born and walked. So you don't know any animal, every animal is born and walked, but humans don't. So he has criticisms, very positive criticism, very nice to understand about Christianity, about you know. So looks like the Buddhism is the origin even of everything. And this, because I met Kikuchi in a moment in my life that I didn't know where to go, and I didn't understand until now that this pledge of shelter that you said, that's so beautiful, which is the pledge of somebody getting to the house of ignorance. To be admitted in the house of ignorance, you need to pledge for shelter. This is what happened to me and others that I know.
I hear you. I hear you. That's beautiful.
This is how the school started. And then he went to find a relationship with Anton Makarenko in Russia that did the first school of communities. So thank you so much. It's very nice. If you later can, please don't forget, send me reference, send to Gina. She can send to me how I can access where it is, the Ohsawa Public Library. But I really deeply appreciate your lecture.
I have the news that that the librarian, or one of the librarians, actually came to California years ago. He was sponsored by the Ohsawa Foundation, and Shugo, his name is Shugo, and
Nanabayashi. Shugo
Nanabayashi is his last name. And I should have his email address for you, and we can start with that. He's a traveler now. He's traveling all sorts of places. But from him, I understood. I had only one question in those years. I asked, has there been a research project undertaken to see the Buddhist underpinnings for the macrobiotic perspective, and make an analysis of that? He shook his head. No, nothing of the sort. All of this to say, Eduardo, that the field is entirely open. No one, apparently, no one in Japan has made the first steps to dealing with the archive. It requires very serious interest. We have from San Diego, Ginat invited the young man, and he's on the recording, an anthropologist who's doing his PhD thesis right now in Japan on the resurgence of macrobiotics in Japan for the young Japanese via the stars, movie stars, pop music stars, these celebrities who come to Japan to perform. And in their public interviews, they say, oh, by the way, I follow a macrobiotic diet. And the children in Japan say, what's that? And then they start to develop their interest. So right now, you are seeing a resurgence of interest in the edible macrobiotics in Japan. not necessarily the edible that you know. You can talk to Clara, she'll tell you. She just got back from Japan. Clara, just wave at Eduardo. The way there's Clara, and it's not the same as you've been taught. It's not the same as you have in the States. You see the macrobiotic. It's a very brown macrobiotic meal. This is the type of macrobiotic meal that we had as we were growing up, based on the color brown, you see. But Nanabayashi, I should have his email address for you. You make your first steps that way. Let's continue. Who else has a question or comment? Anything that you need to clarify? Also, any clarifications required?
I don't want to take all your time, but I need to share something. The concept of macrobiotic that I learned from Kikuchi, that Kikuchi learned from Ohsawa, Ohsawa learned from Buddhism and Dr. Ishizuku there, is that the food is a gratification. It is something that is a pleasure, that is a common pleasure, the pleasure of eating. And he always said something that I said when he said, you know what, if you want to train, the human animal needs, it's like any animal. Your horse jumps, you give a little cube of sugar. The dog do the right trick. So humans need food to feel pleasure. But it's not about food, he said. It's about what they talk when they eat. It's the mental food that comes when you join a group of people on a table to be gratified by the food. And then is when Buddhism and all the philosophy and the concepts of Ohsawa come, because he creates this beautiful set of ideas that are the mental macrobiotic. This is what keeps it alive, and not only the food. The food you can go with, no. But anyway, I think that the mental food, the mental macrobiotic food, is what's behind. It's like the iceberg. The tip is the food, but the big part of it is the mental food. When I see the young kids in Brazil now, young kids, the 20-year-old generation, talking about Kikuchi and Ohsawa and going online and doing lectures like this, it's about exchanging ideas. These ideas are modern until today, and because they're perpetual. This is not something. So just want to insert this information, because it's a very complex thing. It's much more than we can see. You know,
it's excellent. It's excellent. The energy of a gathering at the table is what you're talking about. And in one word, it's the energy. And when you put yin and yang together, what do you get?
Energy.
What do you get when you put yin and yang together? Why do you put yin and yang together?
You get movement.
Clara says movement. Anybody else? This is a fundamental in your education, in your macrobiotic education. Your teachers should have instructed you. Why do you put yin and yang together?
You can get balance.
Excuse me?
You can get balance.
You can get balance. That's very good. So we have movement, we have balance. Anyone else?
You know, the concept of yin and yang that Kikuchi taught me is different. He always criticized the Korean flag. He said yin and yang are not the same. Yin and yang are in constant movement. So he has a new, I can find in my library here, show to the group, a new concept of yin and yang. It starts on the clockwise because of ascendant, and it started with a small thing, goes to the big thing, and move, because yin and yang is, for what I learned, is synonymous of life.
Let me interject right here. And one thing that I discovered over the past years is that a lot of the second and third generation teachers did not get into the Ohsawan formulas. Ohsawa puts it very, very clearly, and people are entitled. They say, I've developed my own formulas, I've developed my own theories, and this is what I'm teaching, and that's fair. But people, the students, really need to know, I would think, what is the point about putting yin and yang together? And Ohsawa tells you very specifically in his theorems, yin is expansive, yang is contractive, yin and yang together create energy. When you describe, Eduardo, the table, the gathering at the table, enjoying the food and an animated discussion occurring, the reason that that animated discussion is occurring, according to Ohsawan theories, is because the food is appropriate. The food is appropriate, and you get the energy, and you derive the energy out of that, you see. Very worthwhile. Take a look at the original theorems and laws, the 12 theorems of the unique principle that Ohsawa codified, and the 7 laws of the order of the universe. Really wonderful for a very simple, concise grasp of traditional macrobiotic theory dating from Ohsawa's time. Then you'll have Ohsawa as the traditionalist. You'll have the more modern teachers and their theories. You use the two of them together. Why is that so important? Because the number 2 is the important number in the Far East. The number 2, not the number 1. It's not the number 1, the number 2, because you need 2 things opposing each other in order to be able to grab hold. You need a yin, correct. You need a yin and you need a yang.
Mike, we have a question with about a couple minutes to go.
Okay.
No less than a wonderful question. Could yin and yang be said to invite contemplation of the infinite?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ihara had the most beautiful way to put this. Listen to this as an illustration of the importance of the number 2. He says, you find the 2, you find the yin and the yang. You've found the 1. And what is the 1? The infinite universe. So you're not searching. Ihara is telling you, you're not searching for the number 1, folks. You're getting the 2. Put them together, that gets you your metaphysical contemplation. Does that answer the question?
That's a beautiful answer.
All right, that was pure Herman. That was pure Herman, the man who lost his mind.
Please say the koan about the clap of one hand.
Yes, Maria is reminding me. The sound of one hand clapping, you see. That's a beautiful coda to the question. You remember when you're asking that question, remember the koan, the sound of one hand clapping. Beautiful.
Mike,
Thank
it's,
you, Janan. That's wonderful. And seeking
we
the two,
clearly
we find
could,
the one.
we could easily go on, and we will. So let's take 10 minutes, and Christina is here with us already. She's next up and going to
Great.
give us a cooking class, which is always welcome. So
Yeah.
looking forward to that. Let's take 10 minutes, and we'll start at the top of the hour.
Top of the hour.
Yeah.
Love you. Thank you. Thank you. See you
Mm,
all later.
it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you.